occasion like this, a conference that has a question before it, is wonderful not only in what we end up, in a sense, sort of reaffirming about the question that brought us all together, but I do believe there's another kind of potential, which is to re-expose the question. And so my attempt here with my contribution will be to try to add perhaps another sort of valence or another way to re-enter, right, the question before us, or the word, transact. And something that I've been thinking about, and it's a word that doesn't exist, so already I begin at a point with a word that doesn't exist. And it's translative, but not spelled with the appropriate A, but with an insertion of an I. So there, Translitive. And let me talk a little bit about what I'm doing here with this word. But do remember, it's a word that doesn't exist. So where does that place us? Right? I'm a poet. I'm talking about a word that doesn't exist. I mean, you could certainly think of it as a neologism, right? Between the two words, translative, which would be the correct, right, having to do with translation, serving to translate, or pertaining to the transfer of something from one person, position, or place to another, or in the grammatical sense, noting a case whose distinctive function is to indicate a change from one state into another. But I'm hearing, right, translative and transitive, I believe. So transitive, transient, transitory, characterized by or involving transition in various senses. Or in philosophy, perhaps, passing out of itself, passing over to or affecting something else, operating beyond itself. So you hear the two rubs there, right? Translative, transitive. But I'm also very interested in the fact that when you look at the word, like if you were looking at me typing this word, you go like, that's misspelled, that's incorrect. And I'm very interested in the incorrect, or what is seemingly wrong, or the non-standard. You know, what is the presence of this irritating non-standard, which kicks for me into the region of the uncategorizable. Thus, the question here is, but how does the incorrect, non-standard, or estranging the uncategorizable also call up an otherwise of apprehension? So when I received word about the sort of the rubric for this conference transaction, it was sort of a glad tiding because I have been obsessed actually with the prefix trans for the very longest time. So, why? Because at its root, this notion of to cross, cross over, carrying the vestige of something into another unrelated region. Then my mind, turns a little sort of facet, and I'm thinking trans, as in without terminus, or having a co-terminus, or occupying something charismatic, right? Something that is already multiple, already multidirectional, already multivalent. That notion of trans. Or yet turning the prism one more time. Trans, as in to put something into motion. It's a condition or state of something being mobilized. One more term on the prefix trans. And here are some of the things that I want to just at least get into a shared space about how I'm thinking this prefix trans. Do not capitulate to the given. To fathom at the limit. To thwart that which diminishes sense. Or I could put it in a different frame and say something like, to embolden the capacity to have sense. So there's sort of a cog there to thwart that which diminishes or flattens sense, / to embolden the capacity to have sense. To bring that which is not in language to language. That's a little mouthful, but you get the idea. To bring that which is not in language to language. To wander into the unterritorialized in oneself. Let me say a little bit about how this presentation will go. I wanted to, in a sense, commingle a set of notes that I took, in preparation for this talk, and I'll give you a little cue when I'm reading those notes by saying transcript. And you need to know here that it's not just one sort of fell swoop, like I didn't take something from just a given set of notes, but that I went through them numerous times, so that I'm sort of composing and recomposing, or I'm looking at what I've written, right, to scribe initially, like the original, writing down, and then kind of re-inscribing and transcribing. So there's 3 or 4 different passes at what it means to write, read, write again. So that's what I mean by transcript here, and I thought that would actually be another meaning of trans, that most of us, when you're reading, writing, thinking, reading, writing, thinking, it's never one pass, right? It's already happening in this sort of admixture of reading, writing space. And it's more or beyond reciprocity, right? It's not like a ping-ponging. Here I'm reading, here I'm thinking, here I'm writing. But it's already happening as a kind of mutually inflected activity that we sometimes separate. And here I'm writing, here I'm reading, here I'm thinking, here I'm recomposing. But I think all of those things happen more or less simultaneously all the time. So I'll read what sounds like, right, transcript 1, 2, whatever they're numbered. And then in between them, I will be reading from my most recent book of poems. So is that clear what the structure is? Okay, so transcripts, reading from book of poems. One might hear in translative, transpire, transliterate, translocate, transverse, transhistorical, transpose. Here I'm very interested in transposition that happens in a musical score, like when you change keys, for example. Transmutate, transtemporal, transmigratory, transform. Transitive hovers at the transom. It relieves the contestatory, the agonistic of any facile slide into opposition and bifurcation. It attends to oscillatory entanglements of borders, languages, and cultures. It intensifies rather than settles the terms by which we negotiate simultaneously the limits of the unfamiliar and the limits of the familiar. The transitive traces the edges and folds of the incommensurate, the non-equivalent, the untranslatable, and the irreducible. It unhinges categorical thinking. the transition from the stability and absoluteness of the world's contents to their dissolution into motions and relations. Burning eye seen of that one eye seen, Jack in the pulpit, peddling. To a body of infinite size, there can be ascribed neither center nor boundary. Signal of peony singing given to bullfrogs. Give ear to the quarrels of the marketplace. When the wheel A was turned, the gate B was raised, thus allowing water to flow from C to D, giving clearance for the ship to pass beneath. Lever, grit, host and parasite, implicated armed band, where would one live? War-torn, turbulent homeland. All that we see could also be otherwise. All that we can describe could also be otherwise. The thing seen is the thing seen together with the whole space. Why are many buildings necessary with so small a farm area? The heat of the midday sun is obvious, but the pressure of populations on the inadequate area of flat land has to be inferred. How to false bottom log whom I saw beautiful as a boy, shun, nestle, ash, gust. Transcript 2. The figure of the translative attends to the predicament of language. Language as linguistic laws convened and guarded by a community, and the attendant promise of safety, recognition, shared intelligibility. Where this shared intelligibility embraces the subject and where it subjugates the subject. Where this contract of intelligibility seals inclusion and exclusion, skews affiliation, violates kinship. Language pressed into service to inculcate, indoctrinate. This paradigm of standardization, not only as it produces linguistic imperialism and linguistic oppression across wide swaths of times and places, but as it underwrites compulsory models of knowledge production. What are the implications for the psyche, creative acuity, critical activity, and to perception itself? What then of language on the roam? Language as activity, language's responsiveness, the event of language, its emancipatory potential. The event of language, every element, scrap, particle, whether graphic, sonic, tactile, rhythmic, kinetic, and so on, that may be said to contribute to the unfurling of language. To settle refugees, to remove landmines, and their task leaped. Ages longer than drought or rain. Grafted. I stayed alive and listened. Orifices mercury and sulfur, so close filled, sever, drift. Translucence of cut pairs on glass plates. Her name and her mother's name, her name and her sister's name. Carcass of coyote and deer separated by a stream licked by bones. Sk, sk. Meaning, the spectator part of the theater, but also stall, birdcage, beehive. The fundamental tenet of all military geography is that every feature of the visible world possesses actual or potential military significance. Little flower, what day is it? The light stops at glove, o'clock and foot. A rain-saturated tree trunk becomes a feeling. The city of one's birth and the people inside it. Transcript 3. The event of language reconstellates orality and aurality, the ocular and the acoustic, enunciation and stutter. War is there in travel, the same as my sister, brothers and mother. The father is thrush white at birth and at dusk. Father is burying the ground cool to the touch. This is some color